Well, hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast. Unbelievably and inexplicably, we are back for a brand new series of programs looking at the previous week and trying to tackle what happened. I am the radio personality and Premier League commentator Tom Rennie. Alongside me for this one is a star of Apple's MLS coverage. He's done, at this point, MLS and Leagues Cup games, 750 of them. It's incredible. The man he is somehow in both California and New York and Delaware, and I don't know any other states at the same time. He's also on Sirius XM with me on Thursdays and Fridays, plus all over the schedule. Subscribe today if you're in the USA. It is Dunny, Brian, Dunny, Dunno, Dunseth. How are you, mate? You all right?
That's a great recovery right there. Yeah, I'm fantastic. I was on the plane at 3 a.m. local time. I headed to the airport. I was in Houston, I believe. I'm back in Salt Lake City for, I think, about 24 hours. And then I'm off to Los Angeles, specifically Pasadena, where I'll be a part of the coverage for Apple TV for LAFC against Monterrey, the game that I just covered last night in Houston. Monterrey beating Tigres in the Clásico Regio. But yeah, I don't know where I'm at. I'm trying to figure it all out. There's a lot of games. My kids barely know me. My wife, I don't even know if she's my wife at this stage of the summer. But school starts right around the corner.
I've had both kids today, mate. Honestly, I don't know how you've got to this stage where all three of yours are still like living with you. I've just done one day. My wife's been back to work now for like a week. And there was a point today where I had a full-on existential crisis. I put my boy to bed and I put my daughter in front of the television for the first time today around 12 o'clock. He'd been a real prick all morning. And then I sat down outside in our new garden, which took 3 weeks longer than it should have done and more thousands of pounds than I would have hoped to get done. I sat down with my coffee, with the paper, ready to get ready for this program. So I'm just, I'm having another coffee right now at 8 p.m. local time. So that's fine. Now, look, there's so much to get through. There is so much to get through. And we're also making a bit of a decision here not to do 10-hour podcast this year because it's kind of stupid and your commute only lasts around 45. So we'll do what we can. We have got some questions from listeners, which I might try and get to. But we basically said earlier today, what would you like us to talk about? And we had so many like really fun responses, but mainly because we're recording this on Wednesday, 9th of August, 2023, the year of our Lord, they all just said, make Tom talk about Harry Maguire.
Oh, I love you people.
We got like about 15 or 16 people just saying, do Maguire, make Tom do Maguire. Here's a gif of Maguire. Someone sent me a text after I sent that tweet of just a slab of meat. Yeah. So I assume that's what we want. Now, I have got things to say on it. Of course I do. But before I go off on another like tangent, like the episode post-Conference League final where you said, Tom, how are you? And I spoke for an uninterrupted 15 minutes. And at the end of it, I said, Man City won the Champions League, Dunny. Thoughts? Brian Dunseth, Harry Maguire, he is leaving your Manchester United, the team you support in English football, maybe someone you've spoken about more in the last 4 years than any other in red at Old Trafford. What do you think? He's going. It's over.
Yeah, I think he's probably the only player that probably outshined the vilification of a player at Manchester United. I'm not even sure if that's a word. Was Cristiano Ronaldo, and that was about a calendar year ago. Listen, I don't have anything against Harry Maguire. I actually think Harry Maguire is a really good player, but I just don't think with Rafael Varane, Lisandro Martinez, that there was ever going to be a situation where Harry Maguire was going to be picked before either of those players. Now, we talk about the England national team. We talk about consistency of performance. We talk about games played. All of those things were not going to be in the player profile of Harry Maguire at Manchester United going forward. I think, 15 games last year? Yeah. Not ideal. And listen, if the price tag wasn't what it was, and listen, I always have a difficult time with price tags because I think the value of a player is what the necessity is for the club at the time. And Manchester United at the time needed a big leader in a center back position, and Harry Maguire at that point was available in his career. So the price point for me doesn't really matter, but I understand that is a price point that is going to hover over his head. The reality is he needed to play. The reality is Erik ten Hag wasn't going to play him. The reality is for Manchester United, he was on an exorbitant amount of wages every single week on top of the amount that they spent for him. So it works for them. For West Ham, I think you're getting a fantastic player. I think he's for 30 million. I think he's a steal. He's exactly what you guys need as a center back, as a presence, as a leader. On set piece opportunities going forward, he'll headbutt his own teammate. He might even kick his own player in the process while doing a scorpion windmill, trying to get to the ball where Eric Bailly still slams, or no, it's Paul Pogba slamming the ground and in disbelief that he got kicked in the head by Harry Maguire on a scorpion kick. But the reality is he makes you guys better. And thank you very much.
So my thoughts on Harry Maguire.
There we go.
Firstly, I want to say this about Manchester United supporters, right? The ones online are normally very different to the ones you meet in person, and they are normally very different from the ones that go to the games inside Old Trafford. Yeah. I'll tell you this now before I get all neg about it. I actually find the supporters inside Old Trafford to be probably the most supportive of any crowd in the Premier League, because I think maybe because of the growth of success and the fact it is such a big day out for people and, you know, all that sort of stuff. They've been rewarded for their fandom, most of those fans. And so when you go to grounds, and I've been a West Ham fan, when things go well toxic inside the stadium, it can be so bad that people try and throw coins at the owners. I don't see that happening at Old Trafford. Even with the Glazer thing, it's not about the team or the team on the field. And, you know, I do find them to be quite a supportive crowd. Not you know, they're not angels or anything, but I do find that. The ones you meet outside the stadium who don't go to games tend to be a bit more obnoxious. And the ones on whatever that website Elon Musk bought is called now tend to be just terrible, terrible people. And the reason I say that is because I think certainly the online Manchester United fans, I think they've really embarrassed themselves with Harry Maguire. The online ones here. So don't at me if you're a regular fan, or feel free. I don't care. The online Manchester United community went way too far on Harry Maguire. Way too far. Some of the vilification of him, some of the criticism of him. We know what he's good at. We know what he's bad at. Is he a Manchester United defender in this current iteration? No, he's not. And you laid that out perfectly when you spoke about Erik ten Hag. But at the time he came in, you had Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who was a weak manager, needed a leader, and Maguire filled that void that Solskjaer desperately needed at that moment in time. And I think you could say the first year, 18 months, there's some qualified successes in there.
I would agree.
Over time, the fit has not been right. I think last season, Maguire maybe could have cut his losses when it became obvious, but in many ways, kudos to him for thinking, I could still be Man United's best centre-half and captain. He did. I think he genuinely believed that.
I agree.
I don't think he did it because the Man United money is incredible. You know, every Man United player gets about £200,000 a week more than anyone else, you know, that isn't owned by a sovereign wealth fund. I don't think he stayed for that. I think he thought he could get his way back into the team, didn't do it. So that all being said, the fit wasn't right at Manchester United. I think the online vilification of him has got so widespread now, there was no real future for him there. I think it had bled over maybe a little bit into the actual crowd. And the whole strip to the captaincy thing, I don't think you really come back from that anywhere. So to go to West Ham, the only reason I think it makes any sense to me is because of the manager who's currently there. And if David Moyes stays this season, and I think he will, and I think he's earned the right to, I think he could have got sacked last season, and I don't back away from that at all in the last campaign. If he'd have been sacked at some point between pre-World Cup and March, he would have earned it for how diabolical some of the performances were. But at West Ham United, what is he going to get? He's going to get a manager who plays low block, sit deep, however you describe that, depending on your generation. What he likes to do is have someone ping the ball over the top from distance, 2 runners, 3 up front, who can get in behind and bring the team upfield at pace, like he did the first 2 seasons, less so last season. I think you've got someone who reads the game pretty well, will win the ball in the air, and play alongside probably Aguirre in a 2 or Zuma and Aguirre in a 3. That makes a lot of sense. Plus, they're signing James Ward-Prowse as well. So, you know, here come Corners FC for you. Don't give a set piece away. You're in massive trouble. I mean, James Ward-Prowse delivering to Harry Maguire and Kurt Zuma and Thomas Soucek and maybe Mikel Antonio
and Thilo Kehrer.
No, I'm not including Thilo Kehrer.
Oh.
because
online vitriol.
No, because do you know what?
That's a legend right there. That is a trophy winner, Tilo Kehrer. You put some respect on his name.
No, let's not go wild, and let's not talk like we're on an internet forum now. Okay, we talk like adults here. I'm not putting any respect on his name. I'm not a 13-year-old on Twitter.
Slap that respect on his name.
X? What I don't know. But no, Tilo Kehrer, I've embarrassed myself over Tilo Kehrer, and I reserve the right to do that as a fan. I think a lot more West Ham fans like him than I do, and they are wrong. So, look, I just think that the fit makes sense, the team makes sense, the price ain't too bad, and West Ham, having sold Declan Rice, they've not even announced the captain yet because there isn't a captain. So I kind of think, Dunny, it just sort of makes sense, and when he's officially signed, as we record this, he's not. I'll go on that crappy website, whatever it is called at that point, and defend him to the hilt.
I saw that.
From that point onwards.
I saw that. I saw that you are just hours away from being the true English national team savant that you are and claiming Harry Maguire as your own. By the way, Scamacca, are you good with the departure of Scamacca?
Yeah, I don't want to do all West Ham, but West Ham are kind of the chaos card currently, so I suppose we have to do him a little bit. I'm glad Scamacca's gone. I thought he was useless. I thought that he... Look, we can talk until the cows come home about whether David Moyes used him right or wrong, and can he use that kind of striker? And the answer is he can't. So if you're going to buy a striker, they now have to buy a striker again. Buy someone of the profile of Mikel Antonio. The only striker that's actually worked at the club for 5 years. Maybe buy somebody with that profile instead of different types of players. But by the way, can I just say, Scamacca didn't try a lick at West Ham. He was so lazy. Great shot, didn't put the effort in. Couldn't work in the system, and they got their money back. That's pretty good.
Well, by the way, follow the money, right? Rasmus Højbjerg to Manchester United, Scamacca to Atalanta, and Harry Maguire to West Ham.
Yeah. So do we still have the Declan Rice money to spend then? That's handy because we need lots more players.
I feel like you do. You do. Now, I know that you want, he was the bad guy in Rocky 4, but, Scott McTominay, I would break you. Is available. I know that you want him. Yeah, I know you want him.
I don't think now they bought Edson Alvarez, Ward-Prowse, and Maguire that is on. That
Edson Alvarez is a good player though. Yeah. You'll like him.
Good.
Mexican international. You're gonna like him.
Looks quite good. Let's hope. I want to move on from West Ham to get some other questions, but let's hope the Paqueta thing doesn't happen. Eh?
Oh, I thought you didn't like him.
I don't like him really.
Oh, okay.
But I think that you can't afford to sell like £250 million worth of talent with 20 days to go until the window closes. I always say this, and let's broaden it out to this point, right? The transfer window opened fucking ages ago. Sorry, Tim. It opened fucking ages ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim. And we now
Tim.
We are those bastards in claret and blue. Sorry, Tim. I opened ages ago, right? And all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, we've got to do some transfers. Like, this whole system is so stupid. And, like, I'm not a big fan of Lucas Paqueta. I think he was a pretty naff signing until about February, got a bit better, and then was really important April and May. But really, the pass to Bowen in the Conference League final is why they bought him, and he's done it now. So, I'm led to believe next summer there's an £85 million release clause, so he was going to go then anyway. So fine. But if City had come in on July 1st and Paqueta had gone by July 10th, I would have been fine with it because, it doesn't really work with this particular manager, I don't think. I think he had a settling year and, I'm okay with it. Find a replacement, all that sort of stuff. And in the end, they're going to replace Declan Rice with James Ward-Prowse and Edson Alvarez. It's about as good as you're going to do, I think. So fine. I'm fine with it all. But why on earth are all these clubs now suddenly going, oh, we better buy some players, guy? Like, explain this to me. I do not understand why it's all taken so long when it's been open for ages and they're not getting good value.
Well, it goes back to, and I remember you weren't really happy with my analogy at the time, where I said that Manchester City, I've got a good amount of respect for the way Manchester City does its business because they get their business done so significantly early in the window, and yet here they are in the last 48 hours, significantly linked to Paqueta and what that looks like. I think the one big variable right now that we have to acknowledge is the amount of the influx of Saudi Arabian money into the game. Because this is really changed what we thought was a trajectory where there was going to be punishment in this transfer window for clubs. And there was going to be some significant buys, some great buys. I mean, you look at Chelsea and how under the gun that they were with so many different players on so many massive wage bills. We thought there was going to be some cutthroat prices, some slash down sale prices, where maybe some of the smaller teams could then get into the conversation and get some fantastic players. Now, the Saudi Arabian League and the influx of money and the sports washing and PIF, whatever, however you want to verbalize this, has really changed this summer transfer window in ways that none of us were expecting when Cristiano Ronaldo left Manchester United. So here we are. I still am of the belief that there should be a hard window, that the moment that the seasons start, there is a hard window that it slams shut at midnight, the day of the game. So midnight, and then that next day is the start of the season. That 12:01, that's the start of the season. Hard shut. So that way, no outgoing transfers, no incoming transfers. And that for me is English Premier League, window slam shut, nobody goes out, nobody comes in. So that way, everybody's on the same page. Now, if in Italy they want to keep doing their business, then you do their business until the window shuts. You do it in La Liga, you do it in Germany, whatever. That for me signifies that, okay, you're done, let's go. Season starts. So that way, nobody can get plucked from other teams. You still don't have the opportunity for agents to turn the heads of players and say, I want to leave. And then no one's blindsided by all of this. So at the end of the day, I think to your point, what inevitably it is you just have guys just squeezing the lemon for every ounce they can get out of a potential sale and or transfer right now. Because that's what it really comes down to. Because, you know, at some point we'll talk about Harry Kane, we'll talk about Bayern Munich, we'll talk about Daniel Levy, we'll talk about everything that's happening at Tottenham Hotspur right now. But the reality is Daniel Levy is knowing, he knows exactly what he's doing. And up until that last moment, he's going to squeeze Bayern Munich. He's going to squeeze Harry Kane. And at least at a bare minimum, good on Harry Kane by saying, if this deal is not done before the start of the season, it's done. I focus. I move on with Tottenham Hotspur. If the deal gets done before that theoretical timeline date that he set and the club has set, then okay, I'm out. I just, right now, it's just all about the money and tracking the money, squeezing the money, getting the most that you possibly can. But yeah, at the end of the day, it just makes you look like you're reacting, because the reality is the smaller clubs are waiting for the bigger clubs to make the moves that then are the trickle down, because then the smaller clubs know that they're going to have one or two players that potentially could get poached by the up and coming clubs or the second tier clubs. And then all of a sudden they're caught holding the bag and looking like idiots and saying like, hold on, wait a second. What did I do? I thought we were prepared. I thought we were ready to go. And all of a sudden, maybe one of their top two, top three players are snagged right before the window hits. So it's I don't know, it's really difficult, but at the end of the day, it's always about money.
Which is why, you know, West Ham are doing all this business now, because the Declan Rice transfer took so long, could have been 2 weeks previous, but they couldn't move to the ones in the tier above them, made their moves. And to go back to your point, really interesting. We'll do more of this, I'm sure, as the season goes on. And for regular listeners, I'm going to say the words now. They're coming up, so get excited about it. I know people love it when I say this on every program. But the Saudi Arabia thing and the sovereign wealth funds of European football, they've really changed the market in a damaging way to those not in that group. So you already had sovereign wealth funds coming from other countries, coming to, in this case, England, but Paris Saint-Germain and around Europe as well, buying up clubs, then inflating the transfer market to such a degree where transfers now basically just don't ever actually be completed. Like no transfer fee is ever fully paid, very, very rarely. So some club arranges a £50 million transfer. That transfer is now paid over like 4, 5, 6. If it's Chelsea, 7 years to A, amortize their contract, but B, spread out that money over a period of years. And then that player will probably get bought after 3 years. Then the debt is then bought up by the club that buys them. It's a circus. It's ridiculous. No one who wrote this system from scratch would implement it because it's dumb as shit. Sorry, Tim. So they aren't going to do that. But the market has become that because of sovereign wealth funds and hedge funds and oligarchs and all that sort of stuff. So we're already living in that market where no one can do a transfer, no one can have a conversation about a player's value because the market is so wildly inflated. Now you add in your point, which is so interesting and one that I can speculate on, but at the moment we don't know how it's going to come to fruition. But Mohammed bin Salman and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia / the Crown Prince essentially bought the 4 biggest clubs in Saudi Arabia, right? So they're already investing heavily in them, but they now own them. And so because they own them, part of the project to sports wash doesn't feel right here. It feels bigger. But let's say sports wash the name of Saudi Arabia to people who just don't give a toss about human rights. They give a toss about where Ronaldo plays. And you're entitled to do that. You don't all have to be news junkies. That's fine. It's an escapist thing. That's why they do it. That's why some of the most powerful forces in the world are doing this to us. They bought these clubs and they're signing Benzema and Mane and Henderson because £1 million a week doesn't mean anything to people who are basically using the natural resources of a country to pay these players. So what this is now is a hyperinflation. It's extreme capitalism of a market that already had sold its soul to the concept of hypercapitalization, right? We're already in it. And now this other lot have gone, well, actually, that money Paris Saint-Germain have got, and that money that Man United have got from the debt of the Glazers, that money that Man City have got. That's literally nothing. I bought a miniature model of a horse with that money. It means nothing to me. You see this bit of custard? This custard in this pot was being eaten by Marilyn Monroe when she died. So says the auctioneer. And I paid $6 billion for it because $6 billion means nothing to me because I run the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That's where we are now. The money is so nothing to them. They can just go, Jordan Henderson, knees have gone, can't run, looking to retire. Here's £40 million. And everyone's like, oh, no, Jordan Henderson won't do it because he wore a rainbow captain's armband once. This is not that kind of money. And they're human beings. And I don't think they're going to say no to it. I don't know if I would. I like to think of myself as a kind of moral, upstanding individual. Bung me £10 million and I'll tell you I think that Tilo Kehrer is a world-class player. I'll do whatever you want for the money. My mortgage ain't paid. My kids need shoes. So I think it's a really fascinating point, Danny, and I wonder whether that Saudi Arabian bit, it's almost like a little release valve, isn't it, for the other hyper-rich clubs in Europe, because Liverpool didn't want Jordan Henderson, and they didn't want Fabinho, and Bayern didn't want Mane, and Chelsea didn't want Conte, and United obviously didn't want Ronaldo, and we could do 100 of these. It's going to go on and on and on. Benzema was probably finished at Real Madrid at the level they wanted, so they managed to get his huge wage, which is just as important as the transfer fee, by the way, which we always understandably don't talk about as much because of the bright lights of a transfer fee. But I mean, what do you make to it? Do you think it's going to be extremely negative on the European game? Does there have to be some sort of legislation?
Well, but for those that are new to the game, we've seen this happen. We've seen it happen in UAE. We've seen it happen in Qatar. We've seen it happen in Japan. We've seen it happen in China. China, the most recent, what was it, about 8 years ago? I mean, Carlitos Tevez walked away with like 250 million when it was all said and done. Drogba was over there. Anelka was over there. Hulk was over there. Who else was over? I mean,
Oscar went, didn't he? At like 25.
Oscar went in the middle of him. I mean, they were. Robinho, it felt like it was more like it was very Brazilian at the time as well because some of the agents involved.
Yeah. And also people from Sao Paulo, they don't give a toss whether Man United or Man City win the Champions League. Like they are trying to make as much money as possible from their career, a lot of these guys. And, to a point, more power to them.
Yeah, no, listen, you've got a short amount of time. And if you can protect your family, generational family, 100%, you got to do whatever you got to do. The intriguing conversation for me is that this is different because you're talking about Saudi Arabia backing it. It's not just gajillionaires. Let's use China. It wasn't just, gajillionaires that were individuals or companies in China that were backing these individual teams to create this super league. This feels a little bit different. I just wonder what the end game is. I wonder what the end game is here, because for the players, the difficulty to turn this down, I mean, you've got to have a couple of tough conversations. You got to think about your family. You got to think about your partners. You got to think about your children, your significant others.
And your knees, Dunny. Think about your knees. And Alexander Mitrovic is pushing to go to Saudi Arabia, and I think he knows something we don't.
Well, and the amount of money and the culture, the lifestyle, the living arrangements, all of these things come into play. We do a lot of this thing where we judge the players between the white lines for 90 minutes, but we often don't take into account the private lives of the players and everything that's happening. There will be players that will take this money, that will move to Saudi Arabia, and that will not be happy. And it's not a Saudi Arabian thing. The same thing we've seen Kun Aguero and his wife separating once they moved to Manchester. The storylines, there's plenty of players here in the United States that have moved and their significant others have wanted to go home. It happens all over the world. So this will happen. But bigger picture, I don't see an end to it. There's nothing to suggest they're slowing down. They're only speeding up. The idea of financial fair play doesn't seem to exist. The idea of paying wages of players or not paying wages of players, and then FIFA stipulating some type of ban or inability to register players. I'm intrigued to see the UEFA, FIFA side of this evolution of what we're seeing in Saudi Arabian football right now. I'm also intrigued to see. I'm trying to wrap my head around what this looks like for Saudi Arabia. At the end of the day, for them to compete, for the league to compete at the highest level, it's the same issue that Major League Soccer deals with, and that is the inability to compete on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. Champions League football is the pinnacle of sport for footballers around the world. Every player that talks about being at secondarily the World Cup, after the World Cup, representing your nation at the World Cup, going to a World Cup, the pinnacle of football is playing in Champions League football. Every athlete, every player will talk about the dreams and aspirations of trying to play on that stage, being in a Champions League final. MLS can't compete with that. Saudi Arabia can't compete with that. So with all of, and these are two very different systems, two very different structures, and the growth of Major League Soccer has been slow and steady, and now with the addition of Lionel Messi is skyrocketed, right? Saudi Arabian football, not a lot of people were paying attention. And then Cristiano Ronaldo goes there. And all of a sudden, you're seeing all these highlights pop up on social media. Like, okay, cool, but it's Saudi Arabia. Like, I don't know what this really looks like. And now all of a sudden, they're blowing the doors off of all these signings. And you're seeing from a social media perspective, IMG getting the television rights, DAZN seemingly getting the rights to broadcast worldwide, or at least in certain territories. But again, I just think about, okay, how do fans get into the stadium to support these clubs? What does the fandom look like? And then what is do you talk about? There's three fans, right? There's those in the stadiums, those outside the stadiums, and those on Twitter. How does this look like to get fans to sell the product into the stadium? And the only thing I can think of is somehow being a part of Champions League, but they're not in UEFA. So how does this look? Because end all be all is going to be FIFA Club World Cup. And right now, the stature of the FIFA Club World Cup does not equate to the significance of winning a Champions League trophy. So I know what it looks like down the line. I said to a bunch of buddies, I'm really intrigued to see what next summer looks like, because I would assume Saudi Arabian football is going to be displayed for these international friendlies in the United States during the summer next year. But big picture, there's got to be a plan. And I would love to be a fly on the wall to understand the complexity of what this plan that has been put into play truly looks like for the decision makers, the governors, or those that, can open up the ATMs for the incredible amounts of money that these players are going for currently.
Do you know what? I'd not thought about that until you just said it there. The Club World Cup. How much Infantino, who basically lives in Qatar, wants to push the Club World Cup, more games, and take the power away from UEFA, give it to FIFA. What do? You have a Club World Cup, but you can't really, because the Premier League teams and the European teams are so much more powerful than the others. Oh, well, not if you take on someone in Saudi Arabia and the team has got Sadio Mane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's going to be held in the United States. Yeah, and it's coming to the United States in 2 years' time.
I think that is really, really interesting. And one we'll talk about at length another time, I think. But also, that's where UEFA, they might need to think, right, we either regulate or there might be another competition the boys in Sao Paulo are thinking about playing in when they choose their club, and it's not going to be the UEFA Champions League. I want to move on, though, because there's some other stories I did want to get your view on. Let's do Lionel Messi. I mean, we should do a bit of Lionel Messi because I was actually in the USA when Lionel Messi made his debut, but I went to see the Yankees play baseball against the Kansas City, I want to say Chihuahuas. That's not right. No, Royals. They're like a cigar, Royals. I did remember it because I thought that seemed strange. Anyway, in this in Yankee Stadium, so the new Yankee Stadium, how many is it? 80? It's massive. It's monumental.
Yeah. 75, 80, something like that, so I believe.
I just got to New York and then got the train to the Bronx to the game. And I missed the first 2 innings and all that sort of stuff. And you know what it's like at the baseball for those that have been, you end up just sort of chatting and stuff. Near 60,000 is the capacity. Thank you, Tim. So I end up just like, as you do, I bought them giant beers, which are just ridiculous. And I went to my seat for a bit and chatted to some guy alongside me. He was from Colombia and his girlfriend, the tourist seats right at the top. And the guy was from Colombia, had his phone out. And he's watching Lionel Messi come on for Inter Miami. I think he was still on the bench at the time. He hadn't come on as yet.
Second half.
At the time it was happening. So it may have been some warm-up shots or something. But he's watching it. And we had a little chat about Lionel Messi whilst not understanding a clue what was happening in the baseball. Everyone started doing the YMCA. It was so dumb. I really enjoyed it, but it was stupid. It was so stupid, but it was brilliant. And then I went downstairs after a while after chatting to him and sort of chatting to some people as you do. Everyone was absolutely smashed. And even like baseball fan, Yankee fan Americans, because I said, I'm from England. I'm a soccer commentator and Sirius XM FC and all that. They were like, oh, isn't Lionel Messi playing? What are you doing here, dude? Like, and that, my point is the crossover appeal of this Lionel Messi thing. A bloke in Yankee Stadium while the Yankees were playing was talking about Lionel Messi, and another guy who was a tourist, to be fair, was watching it on his phone. He's played a few games. I think he's already into Miami's like third highest scorer ever or something. It's going pretty well.
It really is. I mean, you had Sergi Busquets, you had Jordi Alba, and the flexibility of, and I give so much credit to my former teammate and friend, colleague, Chris Henderson, for being the general manager and having to deal with the previous regime who had significant fines and stipulations put into the way that this roster was being built and dealt with over the last season and a half. Hendo's done an amazing job because it's, a lot of people we do this thing in MLS, right? I'll explain it. LA Galaxy at the time was the super club, right? We'll call it the super club. Most recognizable club in the world when you talked about Major League Soccer. Definitely. And that was the Beckham effect. And David Beckham, to me, still does not get the credit he deserved for changing the trajectory of Major League Soccer at the time in which he left Real Madrid and he came to the United States. Subsequently opens up a lot of doors. Whether you talk about Zlatan, you talk about Drogba, you talk about Thierry Henry, you can talk about Wayne Rooney, all these. This is because of David Beckham doing it first. And getting in his contract the ability to, I think, opt in at $5 million, which ends up being the Inter Miami franchise, which is now worth like over $2 billion, but whatever. This whole situation, what Hendo has dealt with, and the amount of money that the Moss brothers have put in, and the investors of Inter Miami have put in, not only short term but long term, and the U22 initiative players, the young players, and going out and spending, I think, roughly between 16 and 18 million dollars on just the U22 players, on top of thinking about the complexity and the aggressiveness of Major League Soccer, the Major League Soccer ownership group collectively, and then Apple coming in to play when it got this deal done for Lionel Messi. There's no words that any of us could ever provide that will do justice to how much this has changed the eyeballs of Major League Soccer, focusing on the eyeballs of Major League Soccer, specifically Inter Miami, specifically Lionel Messi. I think it was around 700,000 on the Instagrams before his first game, right before his debut. It was somewhere between 8.75 million and 9 million on Instagram before he even made his debut.
Can I ask you two questions that aren't
Yeah.
about the business side, though? That is really interesting. I did want to ask you, number one, about people leaving when he gets taken off. Is that a concern?
No, but see, you and I had this conversation. I literally got in this conversation with my partner Max Bretos on Apple TV. I remember saying to you, the generation of football fans now are completely different. You are a unicorn, and not necessarily in a great way, but you are a unicorn. You are born and raised in a neighborhood that supports your team. There's not a lot of people like you. I'm a Manchester United fan. I grew up in Southern California. I was exposed through VHS tapes through my best friend's family that would send recorded VHS tapes from Oldham in England to California, and we would just consume Manchester United games. That's how I was exposed to Manchester United. My boys, and I tell this story to you, like, for example, my son liked Robert Lewandowski because of the way he played at Bayern Munich. The moment that he left Bayern Munich and went to Barcelona, he wanted a Robert Lewandowski jersey at Barcelona. It wasn't that he was a Bayern Munich fan. It was that he was a Robert Lewandowski fan. So
but on that, and there's a great episode we did on that, which we'll fish out, may put it in the notes, because you made that point really well, and we argued for about 45 minutes on it. But on that, I do think there's a lot of club fans still. I'm not sure I'm as much of a unicorn as you think in that particular respect. Surely the people in Miami are Miami fans because there's not like another big soccer club. So it's weird that they would leave. I get why your son would leave.
But they're not.
The other.
No, but they're not. But see, so I played for the Miami Fusion from 1998 to 2000. What was it? 2000 into 2001. The Miami Fusion was the soccer team, and then it was the Fort Lauderdale Strikers that played in that same stadium. Now it's Inter Miami. So you have football fans, you have soccer fans, but they could be Haitian, they could be Colombian, they could be Venezuelan, they could be Argentine, but they come together because, yes, they enjoy supporting this new club that David Beckham, Jorge Mas, the Mas brothers have put together, even though it's in Fort Lauderdale, but ultimately it'll be down in Miami. So yeah, you can be an Inter Miami fan. But this is ridiculous. The conversation like this, the vitriol, the hatred, like, oh, bro, you got to be a real fan. You got to stay for the game. No, you don't. You can be a Messi fan. Like, and I was one of these fans. We talked about this when Lionel Messi left Barcelona, what the effect would be on travel, airplanes, hotels, cabs, Ubers, food, beverage, because it became a destination. It was synonymous. Lionel Messi was synonymous with a trip to Barcelona. If you went to Barcelona, you tried to time your trip to go see Lionel Messi, or at least you would try to see if Barcelona was playing. For Miami, listen, you're going to have some hardcore supporters that are 4 years old? Yeah. Because Inter Miami is a club that's only 4 years old. When Messi walks off the field, he's done for the day. There's going to be people that say like, okay, he's gone. It's done. The performer that I came to see is no longer performing. I'm out. I don't have a problem with that. This whole, and by the way, like, what the are we talking about? Sorry, Tim. Like, the reality is, like, the hardcore fans are allowed to be the hardcore fans. The new fans, because Messi are there, that want a new pink jersey or a black jersey with a Messi 10 on the back, they can be those fans that show up and pay the money to be a part of the game and not, quote unquote, be the ultras or be the season ticket holders. They just want to see Messi play. So who really fucking cares? Sorry, Tim.
Do you want tourists or not? I mean, I suppose you've got to ask. If you want to sign Lionel Messi, do you want tourists or not? I mean, it was interesting, but I'm glad you put it that way. I thought it was quite well put. Listen, I want to ask you one other really, really, really quick thing. Try and keep it tight if you can before we move on.
Oh, boy.
Ray Hudson mentioned on the football show on Sirius XM FC a couple of days ago. It was on the Twitter page as well. And he was chatting to Charlie, and it was like, why is everyone so surprised that Lionel Messi is so good? Just a quick word on the field for what he's done, the late free kicks and the moments he's had. I mean, has he still got it? I suppose I'm going to ask.
Yeah, listen, I know it's low-hanging fruit, the disrespect for the quality of play in Major League Soccer, but I'll just gently remind everybody to go back and see what he's done over his time at La Liga, what he did in Liga, what he did at the World Cup, what he did even in the last international friendly window, what he did, I think it was against Australia. He is extraordinarily talented. He's special. There's nobody like him in the world with the way that he plays that position. And if you can, and this is a broad stroke, if you can sit back for a second and just analyze and watch his movement off the ball, that tells you so much about the genius that he is with regards to how he exposes space. I read a great book when I was over in Barcelona, and it was about how he takes the first 5 to 10 minutes and he just walks. He just walks around and he's just picking out spaces. He's watching tendencies, and he's just like, I don't know why I'm doing this right now, but he's just kind of like figuring out on the field where the right space is. So then he knows instinctually when he gets the ball where he can turn, pivot, and run. He makes everyone around him better. The technique on the free kick, I mean, at this point, why even have a wall? Just put as many guys on a straight line with the goalkeeper in front of him and see if he can still pick out that same position, because it just feels like it's money every single time. And I'll tell you what, for anyone that thinks that, he's just coming to whatever, the fire that he has, I mean, anytime he gets tackled or like he starts covering his mouth, and that he's MFing people. He's absolutely murdering people and killing people. So what I think two things are at play. One, I think he and his family are incredibly happy. I don't know what transpired in Paris. I can only assume that the devastation of uprooting his family through no fault of his own from Barcelona and having to figure out what life looked like was not fun. But it feels as though from the outside looking in that he and his family are incredibly happy with this new lifestyle that they have in Miami. And I think you'll continue to see this. And by the way, I know you're not on the threads, you're only on the X, but I've got a timestamp. And before the first game, I wrote, Lionel Messi is going to get 20 plus goals before the end of the season.
What's he got now? 9? Is it 9? How many is it now?
I think he's 7.
Well, by the time people hear this, he might have 9. I don't know. Listen, I do want to move on. There's another conversation we might save for next week because we'll see some games about the additional time and all that sort of stuff. I know Rafa Varane's Graham post was really interesting. I do want to have that conversation, but I think we're a bit out of time for it today. Plus, I think most people are still reeling at the fact that people were sending you VHS tapes in 1994 and you open the bag, all your friends are with you thinking it's pornography from England and it's videos of Andre Kanchelskis scoring against Oldham, which is probably true. The
Karol Poborski. Yeah.
All of that is going to be true.
Yeah.
But one final thing before we go, and I know you don't want to talk about Women's World Cup anymore because, you're lost and you're useless now.
Yeah.
But I did just want to talk to you about England and specifically Chloe Kelly's penalty, because I got to tell you this, and I love a penalty. I love a penalty shootout. I would get rid of extra time tomorrow and just do penalties. When you're in it or your team is in it, it's the worst thing ever, right? But away from that, penalties are the best. I love penalties. I love penalty shootouts. I love it when they decide a game. And when everyone's like, oh, it's terrible to see a game decided in that way. No, the exact opposite. It's amazing. I would actually go to watch just penalties. Penalties day at Wembley Stadium. Every team is in it and you get a penalty champion. I love penalties. But I've never seen a penalty like it. Now, I don't watch like that much Women's Super League. I do watch the highlights. I've got colleagues that cover it in great detail that tell me about it, but I don't watch the Women's Super League every week over here in England. I have watched the FA Cup final when West Ham got beaten like 7-0 by Man City a couple of years ago. So I don't know if Chloe Kelly always does this, but this penalty to win this game is absolutely extraordinary, right? I called it, we call Jorginho the hop, skip, jump, or Bruno Fernandes. This was the hop, skip, thump. It was absolutely incredible. She lifts her left leg up like a rearing horse. She then takes another little skip forward and then hits this penalty seemingly mid-air, like she's volleying it home in the skills challenge at MLS All-Star Weekend, right? It's insanity the way she hits it. And this penalty, Dunny, was hit so hard, kind of mid-air, laces through the center of the ball with such power and force and accuracy and aplomb and brilliance. It was actually timed faster than any shot in the Premier League last season, right?
Really?
The fastest shot was Saeed Benrahma against Crystal Palace at London Stadium. And coincidentally, I was at that game. We went on to lose, but it was just...
Wasn't on frame.
wasn't great. But it flew in. It was amazing. The shot was amazing, right? Flew in. It was amazing. And everyone was like, God, that was some effort, that. This was faster than that. It's 111 kilometers, about 74 miles an hour. Extraordinary. I just wanted to get your view as a professional footballer on that penalty and whether you'd ever seen technique like it before.
Yeah, well, I think what happens is when we're messing around, right? When players mess around, male, female, you're messing around and you're taking penalties and you're figuring out new ways, and you're doing the Hernan Crespos, you're doing the Tacaquitos, like you're doing all these different things, and right foot, left foot, you're doing the hop, skip, and the jump, sometimes pirouette, like the stutter step, all these things. But all of a sudden, every once in a while, you'll find something like, ooh, that felt good. And then you try it again. You're like, oh, am I onto something? You're like, and then you start thinking, like you're messing around in training. And then all of a sudden you're like, should I try this? Can I do it in a game? Like, no, I mean, that'd be crazy. But like, what if I did? And then all of a sudden, like you start asking your friends or your teammates, like, should I do this? Think I should? I mean, I was thinking about it, but like, no, we can't really do it in a game, right? Because like this thing's on the line. Like, like what if you miss? Like everyone's gonna make fun of you. And these are one of those penalties because as like remember Simone Zaza, where he took like 86 million steps and it turned into the GIF of all time, where he just kept running and running and running and then shot it to the moon and back. If you miss, you know you were going to be mocked relentlessly. But if you make it, all of a sudden it's like you're a bit of a unicorn. So hit the living piss out of that ball.
Yeah, it was amazing. The winning penalty too, just extraordinary. And you're out, of course. And really briefly, we did this on Grumpy Pundits on Tuesday, but I did just want to read this to you because I thought it was amazing. And we did a whole 3 hours on this on the day you weren't on. Swedish scientist Bjorn Cederström analyzed the deciding penalty between Sweden and the USA and came to the conclusion the ball went over the goal line by 0.08 millimeters, which is about the thickness of a single human hair. That's why you're out and we're in. Hair. How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is you let it get to this point. For me, I can separate all of the nonsense, all the political nonsense that's out there, all the outrage, all of these things with trying to make individuals targets. The reality is they didn't play well enough. And we can talk about managers, we can talk about players, we can talk about system, we can talk about U.S. soccer, we can talk about all this stuff. And we did so in a very similar state back in 2017 when the men failed to qualify. Obviously, different dynamics, but it feels the vitriol very similar manner. If you don't show up and you don't play, a lot of it's about rhythm, a lot of it's about momentum. And unfortunately for the U.S. women's national team, take away all the other nonsense, performance on the field, nowhere near what they expected it to be, much less I think the fan base expected it to be.
Look at you giving us a serious professional answer where really I was going for, it should be at least 5 hairs. 5 hairs. Yeah. It should be the amount of hairs.
I would have said 6. 6 hairs. Come on.
That's more the end of show banter people have come to know and love from this program.
My bad, dog.
Right, that's it for this week's Week in the Tackle. We are back next week with a show, hopefully on Tuesday, usually on Tuesdays, but Dunny is on a lot of planes right now. So we'll do what we can, but certainly every week we'll do a new show. And you can subscribe and watch the show on YouTube if you're listening as a podcast listener, vice versa as well. That is Brian Dunny Dunseth. I am Tom Rennie. The program is called Week in the Tackle. Tim Horsey produced it, and we'll see you next time.